Before we get into this week's episode, I have a very special announcement I'd like to share with you all. As my valued listeners, I wanted you to be the first to know about the inaugural Women and Wealth Catalyst Summit that I'll be hosting in 2025. I hope you'll join me and some other amazing women on March 27th at the Golden Gate Club in San Francisco for a full day of impactful sessions, including fireside conversations, intimate panels, and engaging discussions with values-aligned partners. Do not miss this opportunity to ignite your path to financial success and become part of a supportive network committed to achieving wealth. Reserve your spot today at women.win. That's right, ladies, women.win. And join us for a day that will shape your financial future. If you can't join us in San Francisco, be sure to stay tuned for New York City dates and venues soon to be announced. I can't wait to see you all there.
Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of together and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together. This week, I'm joined by the incredible Laurel Mintz. Laurel is the general partner at Fabric VC and the founder of Elevate My Brand. What I love the most about this interview is how Laurel has navigated her life in the professional world as an investor and then ultimately launching her own fund, all while being at the helm of her company. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. I am here with the incredible, gorgeous, and prolific Laurel Mintz. Laurel, you not only have been running Elevate My Brand now for 15 years, which is an incredible milestone. So congratulations. But you've also been at the head of Fabric VC as a general partner. And I am so excited to have you here today on Getting Rich Together. Thank you for being here.
Oh my God. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So Laurel, one of the things that I love about you is your audaciousness, your openness, your vulnerability, but most importantly, how fun, fashionable, and courageous you are for going out there in the world, raising up voices, speaking your truth. And certainly, while you are all of those things today, I wonder, as a Laurel who's 8, 9, 10 years old, what was she like? What was life like for you as a young girl? Where were you living? What were you seeing? And most importantly, my love, what was money like?
Well, I am literally Laurel from Laurel Canyon here in LA. So I am LAOG, as they say. My dad was a hippie in the 60s here in LA. So I grew up in the Hollywood scene, and my mom was a kindergarten teacher. My dad was an entrepreneur in the furniture industry and import-export actually at that time. And at 8 or 9, let's see, where was I living? My parents used to buy houses and flip them. And actually at around 8, I was living in my namesake house. I was living in the commune that my dad lived in Laurel Canyon, which is wild. Yeah.
Wow. What was this? Tell me about this commune. What is going on in this commune?
Well, in the 60s in Northern California and in Southern California here in LA, there was this very hippie movement, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, as you know, going on. And so my dad lived in what was called the Laurel House in Laurel Canyon, in the heart of the canyon. And his friends were like Frank Zappa, Jefferson Airplane, and they were the epitome of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And then I grew up and I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer. I went the other way.
So when you were younger and your parents are clearly very entrepreneurial, they're basically, figuring life out as they go. And really, it sounds like a fantastic example of how to just throw caution to the wind and say, universe, take me, here we are. What do we want to create? Are there any early memories that you have around, I don't know, wanting to be entrepreneurial or wanting to start something? Did you find yourself really focused in your studies? What sort of a child were you?
I was a very argumentative child. In fact, when I wrote my essay to get into law school, it was about how, from the age of 5 onward, I would always argue and win the argument on why I should stay up later every night before bed. Right. So I was very argument. I think everyone knew that I was going to grow up to be a lawyer. I don't think anyone knew I was going to be an entrepreneur, but I was always a great arguer and I won most arguments. So yeah, I was always that kid for sure. For sure. Yeah, I mean, my dad was an entrepreneur, but my mom was pretty square. So I could have gone either way, I think.
That's so funny. And so while you were in high school and getting ready for university, what were you thinking about money? Did you ever think about part-time jobs? Was it, something where you were just hanging out with friends, having a great time at school? How sort of aware were you about money and sort of the desire or the need to build wealth or have resources?
I think growing up, I mean, that was one of the first questions you just asked, and I didn't answer it. But growing up when I was younger, I wasn't really conscious about it other than I knew that we had it, I think, because my dad was an import export when I was very young. I had my dresses made in Paris and he would bring gifts back when he traveled. And I knew we lived a very posh life. I had au pairs growing up. And yeah, we had everything and anything, but we never talked about money. It was very much we had all the things we needed. Anything I wanted, I could have. And then I remember that changed very much in high school, towards the end of high school, actually. Like I remember 16, 17, 18, something shifted and things got really tight in our house. And my parents never really talked about it. But as I went to college, and I now know the story now looking back, my parents actually lost everything. And I can now share this because I'm working on my own money journey. And I shared this with you when we first met. That was a very feast or famine era. Then my parents ended up having to declare bankruptcy. They lost the house. They ended up having to move into a much smaller house, but I was off to college. So I kind of was like, I'm done. I'm going to move on with my own life and they're going to figure their stuff out. And I kind of just put it in the back of my head and was on to my college journey and didn't really pay attention to what was happening in their world until really after law school, I have to say. But I will tell you, to the earlier question, even when we were well-to-do, my parents always made me work for it. They made me work for gas money. They made me work to pay the insurance for my car when I did get it. And it was a hand-me-down car. I was never like handed things that way. Like we always had what we needed and wanted. But I did go to private school. Like I did live a very posh life. And then they lost everything. And I will say, I think that, and I think I told you this on our first call, that it was probably the best thing that could have actually happened, because had that not happened, I wouldn't know what earning it and working for it and what it felt like to be at the top of the mountain felt like, and what it felt to feel like, the bottom of the mountain felt like, and having to kind of scrape and crawl and understand what both sides felt like. So that was a real journey.
Yeah. And also, I mean, especially at that age, we still think that our parents are, if not heroes, that they have things figured out, right? It's like, we think that they're the adults. They've always told us how wise they are, how they know better, listen to us, come to us for advice. And so what an interesting moment for both you and them to have this real reckoning of, you're now an adult at this age. Yeah. They're clearly, dealing with different financial circumstances. And what a way to sort of also find the humanity in parents and go, wow, like we are all human here. Nothing is guaranteed. And there's an opportunity to come together and really become closer as a family. And then also, wow, what a fire that must have lit under your tuchus in terms of needing to figure things out. So we're clearly not here because you've had a prolific career as a lawyer. We're here because of what you've built as an entrepreneur and what you're doing now with Fabric. But you did have very, very early on successes and things in your life that sort of set you up to building these two incredible businesses. As you were coming out of university, what were you poised to do? What were you ready to do? What was your mindset? What was your drive? What happened next?
Well, I went to law school and business school. So I actually went to law school. I went into undergrad declared. Like I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer. This is my path. And I went in declared and so clear that that was my path, I thought, that I finished all my undergrad requirements almost a year early. So I was able to double minor in art history and philosophy. That's how early I
Get
finished.
out.
Yeah, I finished
Oh my
everything so
God.
early.
Who are you?
So I did everything, finished everything early. And then I went to law school at Rutgers on the East Coast. And I went through my first year of law school and I was like, this is horrible. These people are horrible. Law school is terrible. And I tried like all these different areas of law. I was in the DA's office in special narcotics. I did entertainment law. I did like like healthcare. I did some clerking. Like I did everything you could possibly have tried. And I was like, if I have to work 80 hours a week with these people, I might kill myself. Like this is just terrible. So I went to the dean and I was like, I'm done here. I'm not going to waste my time and money doing something that I am not passionate about. And luckily, she was smart enough to say, okay, well, why don't you try the MBA program? I think that what do you think is missing? And I said, these people are like, if you have a piece of the pie, then you can't have my pie kind of people. And I am not, as you know, that kind of person. And so she said, try the MBA program. That is the like team building, problem solving, creativity. Like that is what the MBA program is. And that was exactly what it was. So I ended up doing the JD MBA, but still didn't know what my path was. So I passed the bar my first time in California and I still practiced because I was still unclear. And, you know, when you're a Jew from the Valley in LA, like you're a doctor or a lawyer, that's all you're meant to be. But as you know, the universe has a different plan for you oftentimes. And my dad got sick. He's healthy now, thank goodness, knock on wood. And I ended up having to step in and take over his interest in a company called Bassett Furniture, which is a big national chain. If you told me I was going to be running a furniture company, I would have told you you were out of your fucking mind. Can I pass on this? Sorry.
Yes, you can.
Okay. And so at 26, I stepped in and was interim CEO of that company for 3 years.
So, okay. So like, you know, shut the front door. You are CEO, 26 years old. You're essentially freshly born into the world at 26 years old. And here you are making massive decisions. You're also probably earning more money than maybe you would ever imagined you would at that time.
Definitely.
How did you reconcile, first of all of this responsibility and what was now on your plate? I'm so eager to hear how you managed your time, your energy, and also what did you do with your money when you first got it? I mean, 26, CEO, what's going on?
Well, I think, you know, at the time I was dealing with my dad going through, I mean, we thought he was dying. He had stage 4 cancer. So we thought he was on his way out. And so it wasn't like I'm this hotshot kid coming and taking over daddy's business kind of situation, right? It was like, I'm here to make sure my family could survive emotionally and financially. Wow. So for that reason, I was very grateful that the team accepted me and I wasn't coming in and, you know, being that hotshot kid.
And what incredible recovery to go from that stage of cancer to where he is today.
Yeah,
I mean,
a miracle, truly.
That's powerful. Wow.
Yeah, he's been cancer-free for 20 years now. I know,
my
amazing.
Gosh. Plugging you for another podcast to talk about
miracles.
To talk about miracles. Yeah, like that is wow. Yeah, okay, amazing. Sorry, please.
No, it's worth talking about. So I think having that mindset, you know, you go in and you're like, I'm here for a purpose, right? And I knew enough about operational structure and marketing. My MBA was in marketing and the legal stuff. And so I went in and I just listened and I knew that he had enough people around him to help guide me in running the business the right way. But I'll tell you again, you know, I'm a truth teller, as you know, and I'm very transparent. I realized in stepping into that business that while my dad was a great salesman, he was not a good businessman. And he had over leveraged himself in that business. And so I was there for a turnaround and I was not prepared for that. And it was really hard. It was really hard, but we did it. And he was able to step back in, got healthy, and I was able to step away and start my first company. So it was, again, like, it was wild.
That's incredible.
I cried almost every day. I'm not going to lie. Like it was hard.
Oh my gosh. And so was it really just the counsel in the company around you that was able to help you navigate the day to day, or who did you turn to? How did you know where to seek advice or where to sort of find counsel from? Because that's a tricky place to be, to realize that this business you were stepping in to manage needed to be turned around. And obviously at 26, it's not as if you've had a history in turning around companies, right? So
Yeah.
how did you figure this out?
Well, I stepped in when he found out he was sick and was going to have to step away. So I did have enough time with him to learn a little bit from him. So, but he also had been the one to put us in this situation. So I knew enough to listen. And also I had enough formal education and training to understand like what he was looking at the P&L and what he should have been looking at a P&L differently, and how things weren't matching up from my actual schooling. So it was like, we're looking at a case study, to be honest. So it was really interesting from that perspective. So honestly, I think part of it, and my husband says this all the time, is like, I have a level of bravado, whether it's healthy or not. When I step into a room or a situation, sometimes I have the like fake it till you make it to a degree that people are like, wow, she really knows her shit. And my husband will be back there like just snickering, like knowing that I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, in the best way possible, because people just believe me. People just believe me because I have this sense of like bravado. And most of the time I do. At this age and stage, I really do. But at that time, I was just fucking faking it, let's be honest.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you got to, right? Yeah. It's like there's also a level of intelligence that comes with knowing when and how to pull off that sort of confidence. So it's a real skill, because you have to be able to leverage it and use it, and that takes a lot of courage also, to just step in and say, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna make this happen. So during that time, when you were in that role, you were, earning a salary. Was it going to your rent? Was it going to savings? Where was the money going?
Yeah. I mean, I moved back from the East Coast, and I was living with my parents, and then this all went down, and I was like, if I am going to be running your business, I cannot live with you. Like this cannot happen. And so I moved out, and I moved into 1 bedroom. And it was so beautifully furnished because we owned the furniture store. It was like perfect. So yeah, it was rent. It was clothing. I didn't think about savings for sure. I didn't really think about the money. If I'm looking back, honestly, I was definitely partying a little too hard, if I'm being totally honest, because I needed to burn off the steam from like I was 26. These were my good party days, right? Like, and I was totally a freaking CEO. Like, this was not how this was supposed to go. I was supposed to be making like decent-ish money. I was right out of law school, and I was supposed to be like, doing grunt work at a law firm and, going out for happy hour martinis. And so, yeah, I had some really good girlfriends in LA that that were female DJs that I hung out with. And so I would go out and listen to music and party and have a good time, and just try and have some balance in my life from being a full-time CEO at 26, which was absolutely
wild. So wild. Okay, so dad comes back, hand him back the company is humming along. Now all of a sudden, do you have the bravado to walk into any room? But you have a lot of experience now at this point to be able to really back it up. So what happens next?
Well, I was like, I guess I'm going to go back to being a lawyer, because that's all I think I know I'm really right to do. Because at that point, I mean, this was 2007 or 8 at that point, 9 almost. I didn't know any consultants. I certainly didn't know anyone. Like, I guess my dad, he was an entrepreneur, but like that wasn't part of the vernacular at the time. It wasn't really a part of, certainly not like it is today. And so I started going back after the big firm jobs, and getting these great 6-figure offers. And my mother was like so excited about them. I remember calling her every time I would get an offer. She'd be like, "Oh my God, this is so great. You're going to go after your dream." And she was so excited. And I was like physically, like viscerally nauseous. I would get these offers, and I would have to like crack open a bottle of Pepto-Bismol. I went through so much Pepto-Bismol. I can't even tell you. Like, I was sick. I was like literally ill every time I got these offers. It really should have made anyone else in the same position like deliriously happy, right? And I was like, I was like having like dry heaves every night. It was awful. And so finally one day I was like, this is like, my body is literally telling me, like my body is literally rejecting the idea of being a lawyer. I probably should listen. And that's when I like kind of just shook it off and I was like, okay, what else there's got to be something else here because this is clearly not my path. And again, the universe just has this really weird way of showing up when you listen. I had done a summer internship with the guy who was doing the LA version of Billion Dollar Babes. I don't know if you remember what that was. Do you remember what that was? Because you're in New York, so you know Billion Dollar Babes. Is it still a thing out there?
I don't think so.
For those of you listening in that don't know what it was like this amazing sample sale with like all the best designers. And he was doing an LA version of this. And I had written him a business plan when I was in business school, like many years before that. And he had introduced me to a woman, I won't say her name for legal reasons, but she was like a really famous makeup artist at the time. She did all the celebrities. This was before the Kardashians made makeup artists real celebrities. And she wanted to raise $5 million to launch her first cosmetic line, but she had no idea how to write a business. She was an artist. She was a creative. She had no business sense. And so he called me randomly one day and he was like, hey, I know you know how to do this. I'm going to introduce you to her. Go have a drink. You can do this for her. And I was like, all right, whatever.
Oh,
I know.
Wow.
I was like, fine, I'll take the meeting, whatever. So we go and we have cocktails and I am like, thank God I was wearing black because I had the worst flop, you know, that flop sweat feeling where you just like sweating through your clothes, but luckily no one can see it. Thank God I was wearing black. Thank God. But I had some liquid courage. I had a martini. It was cocktail hour. And she's like, this is what I need. And she was like this bigger than life personality. I mean, her clients were like Julia Roberts, Tom Cruise, like the biggest A-list celebrities you could name. You would know her name if I said it. Her cosmetics are still everywhere today. And she was like, I need a business plan and a marketing model. And so-and-so said, you can do this. And I was like, absolutely, I can do this. Again, putting my full fake ass bravado on. Meanwhile, I'm like shaking, my hand is shaking with a martini glass in it. And I think she paid me, no, I know she paid me $5,000 for this whole plan. It took me like 3 months to write this plan.
Oh my God, yeah. $5,000 for this, okay, continue. Yeah. It's insane.
So I write this plan. She gets this money and I was like, huh, that's interesting. And then the phone started ringing and this other person hired me to write a marketing model. And then this other person wanted me, this was right when digital was starting to pick up. This was 2009-ish. No, 2008. Yeah, 2008, whatever. And my phone just kept ringing. And it was this person and that person. And about a year went by and I was like, huh, I'm making really good money. I'm setting my own hours. I think that this is like a career. And that's when Elevate was officially born. Because I was like, if I'm going to do this, I've got to play a bigger game than this. I already knew what it was like to actually be like an entrepreneur and have a team. And that's really when Elevate was born.
Wow, that's incredible. And so like the kinds of businesses or the breadth or range of businesses in the early days, like what were the kinds of companies that you got to be creative around?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it was everything from like a company, like a woman who was building like a bra for women who was double D size and up only, to this makeup artist, to a nonprofit that had swim companies for teens, to, I mean, you name it, we did marketing for them. It was everything and anything under the sun. It was wild. To like transport portable oxygen concentrate, like the most boring healthcare companies. It was wild. I mean, and we started doing everything under the marketing umbrella, from branding to messaging to content to web, social. I mean, and that's how we started expanding the company. I remember my first hire was like a part-time assistant, and I was like, I'm like, how am I going to pay this person? I don't even know. And then that person ended up being like my full-time like ops person, like my second in command. Wow. Like 3 or 4 years later, I was like, when I hired her, I was like, you can make this job anything you want it to be. Just show up, do the work. And like, what do you want? She was like, I want to be head of operations someday. I was like, great, write the job description and work towards that. And in like 2 or 3 years, that was her role full time.
That's
we had
incredible.
Like 10 people under her.
And so in these early days, you're obviously starting to earn revenue yourself. You are reinvesting it into the business. Obviously, the money when you're a solopreneur, the money's a lot, right? Because you're not paying for anyone else and you're leveraging your own talent, your own expertise. And so you can kind of spend the money how you want. And then all of a sudden the team grows. And so your salary starts to get balanced out and you start to really implement a financial model for the business. So at what point, were you starting to draw, let's say, a real salary for yourself, right? Your team is there. You're able to really take out a good salary for yourself and maybe start to do things with your capital. At what point in your business were you able to do that?
It's a great question. I mean, the first real person that I had, because I knew that that was never my strong suit. So I don't know if I told you this, but I'm dyslexic. So that numbers were always really hard for me. Reading was always really hard for me, which was why law school was always such a challenge and why I worked so hard and why I was so proud of myself for getting the kinds of grades that I got. And I actually really enjoyed reading because I knew that I was overcoming, a disability. So my first major vendor hire was an outsourced bookkeeper. And that person is with me to this day. She's been with me for almost 13 years. And I'm like, you're never allowed to leave me ever. And she is the most amazing person. And she was actually the first person that was like, you need to take a real salary. Like you have to pay yourself first and everything else has to come secondary. You have to treat yourself like the business owner. Cause I was like, you don't think about it that way structurally. You're like, everyone else comes first and you pay yourself last. And that's the opposite way that you should think as a business. And then I'll be really honest. The first thing I ever did was buy myself a fabulous bag. When I made my first million, I bought myself the most amazing bag. And every year since then, that's been my one big splurge to myself was buying myself a fabulous bag. But when we really started making money as a company, I put in structures in the company to make sure that my team could benefit from that. So that was they're not sexy things, but they're things that are really important. 401ks and Roths and all of the things that long-term set you up for success. And I'm very lucky that I have a partner, my husband, who is and has always been very, very financially savvy. His mother was a brilliant woman. She was like freaking Rain Man when it came to investing and returns. And she was a huge influence in our life, the opposite of my parents in terms of understanding money and teaching us how to make it work for us. So we took a lot of our notes from her, and I feel very lucky to have had the time we had with her and what she taught us about investing and making our money work for us. So that's really what we did with our money. It's not sexy. The bag's much sexier, but I will say making sure my team has 401ks and healthcare and all of that stuff. That's the important stuff and the things that your team really respects of you long term.
And at what stage in your business were you able to roll out these employee benefits?
I probably did it too soon, but I did it too soon intentionally to retain my team.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really incredible. I think also today when we think about just the movement of employees and what sort of makes someone feel secure, these really small things actually add up to a lot of sense of security. Not everyone wants to be an independent contractor who's floating around, yet those sorts of roles are often really glamorized. There is something to be said about having an employee sponsored 401k and, having some stability and, not everyone's supposed to be an entrepreneur. We need folks who are willing to roll up their sleeves and be part of brilliant organizations that are out there changing the world. So from your financial landscape, and obviously at this point you're now married, how are you and your husband sort of talking about money at home? Like, what is the conversation like? How are you guys sharing money values? Where do you spend your money?
Well, I will tell you that was a very interesting dynamic when we got together because I'm a fashion girly, as you know. And when we started getting together and I started talking about fashion, we would get in these giant fights because he thought every time I mentioned Chanel that I was out there buying Chanel. And he was like, oh my God, she's going to put me in the poorhouse. And I was like, no, that's not how it works, honey. I love you. But just because I'm mentioning the new boy bag does not mean I'm out buying the new boy bag every time. I love you. So we went to therapy before we got married. And we talked about our money journeys together. And our dynamic, I will tell you, is very different than most couples. And I share this with everyone, so he's totally fine with me sharing this. But we have a very interesting approach to money. We have a joint account, and we figured out what we need to put in that joint account every month to make our nut, right? This is what we need for our monthly expenses, for the house, for our whatever expenses we have, our insurance and our cars and all the things, whatever. Actually, that's not true. The companies pay for the cars, but you know what I mean. And we each put in our piece of that nut every single month, every month. The rest of it, because we both have multiple businesses, that's our play money. And we do with that whatever we want. And neither of us ask questions. And most people think about that and they're like, what the fuck?
I don't think it's that unusual. I think this idea of let's cover what we need to together and then let's let each other have our own play money, I think is actually quite wise, especially if you have different spending personalities and different things. And, certainly some people are more risk averse, I mean, you talk about angel investing to some people and they think about, how they're going to have to sell off the house. They get really nervous about taking incremental or different kinds of risk. So I think it's actually that's really fantastic.
I want to be clear though, like we have everything in a trust. So like all of our businesses are in a trust that we own jointly, right? It's a joint trust. And all our investments we put in together jointly as well. So like when we decide to go into an investment, we put it in equally, like we do things together. So it's not like bye, see you later. Like everything is still together as well. So it's not like this weird, like, okay, we each pay for half the house and then it's like, fuck off. Right. It's so people think it's weird, but I don't know. It just works for us. And I don't know. We buy art together. We buy all the things together.
I think that's so cool. So at what point sort of in your business did you get more interested in investing in art, investing in other companies? When did you sort of start to realize that investing was going to mean more to you than, let's say, real estate and maybe a brokerage account?
When I started making money, to your earlier question, it became very clear to me that I had an unhealthy relationship with money because of my parents not talking about it and their personal journey and them not planning for the future. And I was like, I need to fix this. This is not going to be good long term. And so I joined a women's investment group, and all of the women were like 10, 15, 20 years older than me. And I would sit in these rooms and I would listen to them talk, and they would say these words and I'd be like, okay, yeah. And I would write these words down, and then I would go home and I would Google them because I would not know what they were talking about. And I would just sit there and I would listen and I would nod and then I would do the homework. But I knew that I just needed to be in these smarter rooms, and I knew that I needed to do something to kind of fix this unhealthy relationship. And I did that for several months.
How old were you when you joined this group?
32-ish, 32.
What a wonderful gift you gave to yourself by doing that. Continue. Yeah. That's really what a great gift.
Yeah. And look, I told you my age when I was running my parents' business. So it was like 29, 30 when I started my own thing, started making some okay money around 32, 33 is when, so like I started thinking like, wow, if I'm going to make money, I got to do something smart. I just can't piss it away, right? Like this is not going to work for me long term. So a few months in, one of the founders brought this deal to us. It was a venture capital deal. And it was a carve out from this much bigger venture capital investment that we would never have gotten access to were it not for this woman's relationship, later stage tech fund. And I came home to Mike and I said, I know that I am learning about this and that I'm new to this world, but I just have this feeling. I just have this gut feeling, and I've been listening and I've been learning, and I know that we need to do this deal. And we scraped every single penny we had liquid together at that time, which was $90,000. And it was, $90,000 is still a lot of money to me to this day. I think it's a lot of money. I don't take anything for granted. I really don't. And I remember, again, the flop sweat feeling. I was like, oh my God, this is so much money. Writing that check, I was like, oh my God, this is so much money. And we did the deal. His mom actually wrote a check into that deal. I brought a couple other people into that deal. And we will exit that position, I think, at the end of this year, top of next. And we're projecting an 8x exit on that one. Yeah.
Oh my
Now
God.
it's on paper now, so don't quote me on that. Paper returns are just but we think it's going to be a pretty decent exit.
Holy bananas. I think that especially these days, it's so important for other women to hear the other side of what is possible. Now that more women are getting opportunities to invest, you have a fund, there's all this more opportunity for exposure. And I think that sort of seeing and experiencing that, hey, this is a long-term game here. And just as much as there is risk, there is the opportunity for reward. And so being able to have those stories, not only, Laurel, does that add to your bravado again, your substantiated bravado. And you're like, see, I can do this. But I think it also is really helpful for women to see what's on the other side, because this feeling of sort of confidence, risk, being able to make smart decisions, being able to work with the right fund managers and being able to know what that is. I think that's such a powerful experience that you get to share with others. And so at that time, you hand over this money and it's like, all right, let's hope and let's see what happens. How was it sort of tracking that over time? And most importantly, how soon after that check did you write your next check? Was you excited? Were you like, this is our time? Or was it, I don't know what I just did right now, and I'm going to cool my jets for a little bit?
I think that was the first investment we ever made other than outside the public. And that is, I don't know if I'd recommend that, but, I usually say it's an age and stage and time and place, right? So like what I tell people is like, you have to have your 401k, your Roth, your public markets, and your real estate play. And after that, then it's play money time, right? Then it's time to start doing high risk, high reward investments. And it's also about your age and stage in terms of life. 45 to like 65 is when you want to start playing in the higher risk, higher reward places because of the long term, for example, for venture, because it's a 10 to 12 year term, right? So like if you're going to invest in something like venture, you don't want to be investing in that at 70 or 80. It doesn't make sense because you don't know how long you're going to be around. So yeah, I don't think we invested anything again for a couple years. And then we did our second LP position maybe 4 years after that. I got a little bit of a bug after that.
Yeah, I think it's exciting. And then also in this rare position of heading up a company that is really able to see how brands move and really what makes a brand successful. Can you share with me a little bit about the insights and how you've been able to really drive like profitability and change within these companies from your vantage point? Because I do think you have a very unique perspective based on your experience.
I think so many companies are underfunded. So that's number one, right? Like we see that every single day. We've worked with over 300 companies. Over 200 of them have been diverse led, and almost 40% of them have raised capital. But the really important statistic is that, well, two of them, 80% of use of funds of most of these companies is used on marketing. And 80% of failure of most of these companies is because of lack of good marketing. So like if we could come in and solve for that, which is part of our thesis at Fabric, then we're solving for like the most challenging parts of the success and failure of most of these companies.
I mean, talk about having a real edge into hedging risk in a way that feels at the very least a little bit less risky, right? To be able to know that you actually have some control over how these things get allocated, and also in the sense of evaluating the opportunity. Marketing can make or break something, and misuse of those funds, I see it all the time, is something that unfortunately I think leaves most founders wanting to pound their heads at the door, right? It's like, how do we win at this thing? Okay, so we continue. So during this whole time, you're still living in LA, right? You are okay, and you purchased a house after your first investment. So you're LA native, you're sticking around. There's like nowhere else Laurel is going. As Elevate is continuing to grow and you go after this for some time, how did things change for you guys personally? How are you guys looking at travel, spending money? Are you still sort of in that role of working in your business, 60, 80, 100 hours a week? How does your organization change? How do you grow up, I guess, in this company?
Yeah, I mean, we've been around now for 15 years. I think we've done a good job of operationalizing the process. And, we went through a lot of change. The pandemic made us do a lot of thinking about what we want for our future. And, we grew really, really fast. I think at like year 7 or 8, we launched the Squishmallows brand, which was like a friggin' rocket ship that we sold to private equity within like 3 or 4 years, I want to say. That's probably our biggest win as a brand. Yeah, that was a huge one. And I had to learn a lot about how not to be a leader through that experience because we grew really, really fast. The team grew really fast. And a lot of the folks that had been with me from day one were not the same team that should have been with me at year 8, right? So we had to evolve as a team. And I'm a better leader and a much better person, I think, at year 15. So there was a lot of evolution that had to happen there for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine, sometimes I think it's interesting, as businesses grow, we grow and our
Yeah,
needs from these businesses change also, and the
absolutely.
things that we want to satisfy us and where we see legacy and future and we should not be expected to be the same people, but yet within organizations and tenured employees, there is a desire to sort of have you stay the same
Mm,
because who you are and your identity is often what your employees rest their identity on,
totally.
and how they see themselves as work is through the stability of who you are. So what were some of the dominoes and how did you decide to take yet again another risk into the world and launch Fabric? What were the thought processes? Was it over many martinis? How did you make this decision?
It was actually brought to my attention, because of my legal and business background, a lot of private equity and venture firms had been coming to us for years to market them. And someone brought it to my attention. They were like, you should think about doing this. And I was like, you're crazy, David. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't need a second headache or a second child. I'm running a really great operating company. That's crazy. And then we got off the phone and I was like, is that crazy? I don't know. Like maybe that is actually a great idea because I'd been seeing all of these, frankly, pale male and stale bros executing all these venture funds terribly, getting terrible returns, all these companies failing, no secret sauce, like just terrible. And I was like, I think I could do that better. And so I went down the rabbit hole and I saw the 2% number, right? That less than 2% of all venture dollars go to diverse led companies. And I was like, well, that's really shitty. But let's be very clear. I'm a capitalist, right? So I saw the 2% number and I kept digging. And then I saw the 25% number, which I don't think a lot of people know actually, which is that when diverse led founders do receive money, they return on average at a 25% higher return rate. And that's when I saw those two numbers together. And I was like, there's a business model there. I can do good and do well. I am super on board for that model. That's really when
Mm.
Fabric started. And then I called Jesse Draper. I know you know the Draper name. They basically are a venture. I mean, they're like third, fourth generation venture. We've been LPs in Jesse's second fund for like 4 or 5 years now. And she'd often reached out to us to help her vet some of her consumer deals because that's what we knew on the agency side at her first fund. And I've known Jessie from her Valley Girl days. I was managing director at Girls in Tech when it started many years ago. It's like we've known each other forever and ever and ever and
I
ever.
love that. So
Yeah,
things
I
are
mean,
coming full circle.
total full circle moment. So I called Jessie and I was like, Jessie, I think I might launch a venture fund. Is that the most insane thing you've ever heard? And her actual response was, fuck yeah, I'm in. Here's a check. Go raise a fund. And I'm sitting on your board. And that's the truth. That's how Fabric started.
Oh my God, I love that so much. And so, what's the journey been like now that you're stepping into this new role, in a landscape that you're quite familiar with, but
Mm,
in a new role, right? Now
yeah.
you're sort of, if you will, at a startup again.
Yeah.
You're
Very
in
much.
you're in the first few years of a startup. What's it feeling like? How are you sort of planning for it? How are you allocating your time now between these two entities? What's Laurel's life like today?
Yeah, it's so hard. It's exciting. So I feel re-energized and it's so mission driven, which is really exciting. It drives me in a new and different way again, right? doing something for 15 years, you blink and 15 years is just like, how did that happen? Right. So being at the precipice of something new again is pretty exciting, I have to say. And the fact that it is so mission aligned, because Fabric only invests in diverse led founders. And we focus on consumer tech and the future of categories. So future of healthcare, future of fintech, future of is a very wide aperture, very intentionally. And it's a very exciting focus. It's also really terrifying. I tell people half the day I'm like, I'm changing the world. And the other half of the day I'm like, I'm going to throw up. So it's like half exciting and half fucking terrifying. But in terms of how I spend my day, again, this is part of like what you were asking earlier. Like I was very intentional about setting this up the right way. So I went back to my team at Elevate and I said, I think there's something really exciting between these two companies. So I set Elevate up as an ESOP. And now my team at Elevate, my top two folks that happen to be a queer man and a Black woman, now own part of the agency. And they're now my partners. And anyone who's at Elevate for 4 years or more will now own part of the agency. It's in furtherance of our social and financial equity mission. And it is just, it's just who we are as an agency.
Bravo, Laurel. Bravo. Like that is not an easy,
No.
nor it's not easy. It's time consuming. And that's not an inexpensive thing to roll out.
No.
I mean, talk about, launching 401ks early in order to be able to retain people, now turning the business into an ESOP to further have people committed to the future growth and to be able to create their own wealth as the business continues to grow. I mean, these are tremendous efforts for a leader to go through in order to ensure the welfare and the wealth building for their employees. It's wonderful.
And I was like, oh, I'm a lawyer. This is going to be easy. It's a 6-page document. How hard can this be? Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, it was really, really hard, but so worth it. And my team is so worth it. So in doing that, it was very clear that like I was going to step away a little bit. And so about 80% of my time is focused on Fabric and about 20% on Elevate. And it flip-flops a little bit every now and then because I have a rolling raise, rolling deploy cycle on the Fabric side. So we raise and then we do a close and we deploy that raise. And then we raise and then we close and then we deploy that raise. So, this is our first time doing this. And also I did it this way to see like, is this really my future? Do I love this? And it turns out I am so built for this shit. Like I am absolutely the right woman for this. Again, I thought that the joy in doing this work was going to be in deploying money to these amazing diverse founders. And it absolutely is. But the actual work in this is educating and empowering folks who have never had a seat at this table to understand the asset class and to understand why it's so critical that they understand how to have a seat at this table. Like that is really what this work is about. And if I can just do that till I'm dead and buried, then I will have done my job.
I love that. One of the questions I was going to ask you was around legacy and, around sort of what the future of what your body of work looks like. You're quite young to be so accomplished and to have already made such an impact in the world today. And, looking at a Laurel who's maybe in her early 100s, because I'm sure you're going to be the first to invest in the technology that allows us to stay looking fabulous for the next, I don't know, hundreds, 120, whatever it looks like. What does legacy look like for you? What is it that you want to see in the world? What will make your heart full before you depart the planet?
I think it's, I keep telling people raising a $10 million fund is moving grains of salt, grains of sand. I think the goal long term is $500 million to $1 billion of assets under management so we can move mountains on that side. And then the education and empowerment side. Someone said to me, and I was like, wow, that's really exciting. Tracy Holland, she's just an amazing founder. She said, you need to be the Brene Brown of venture. Like you need to be preaching this from huge stages and educating people on this conversation. And I was like, I totally love that vision. So if I can even be a quarter of the powerhouse that she is and helping to educate and empower folks that haven't been historically in this conversation, that to me is the legacy I'd like to leave.
Hell yeah.
I feel it. I feel the fire. I'm super pumped. Laurel, darling, as we stand here today, what are some of your most favorite things to spend money on?
For me, I am just about food and wine and experience. I mean, I love things too, don't get me wrong. I have a really intense sunglass addiction, I will tell you. Like it's a problem. My husband's like, really? Another one, really? I mean, I always tell him shoes, sunglasses, and bags, you never are the wrong size for them. You never get too fat for your sunglasses, you know? So I definitely am a thin girl for sure. But I would say, I love food and beverage and travel. There's nothing like getting on a plane and going somewhere and having a cultural experience and realizing how tiny we are in the microcosm of this just amazing world that we live in.
I love that. It's like the feeling of being small and yet also knowing that we are so big, right? We have so much impact.
Connected.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. My last question, Laurel, you're clearly up to some really big stuff, and everyone who listens to the show knows that there's always a call to action to stand behind the women who are creating change, who are doing big, powerful things, because everyone who's listening is also doing big, powerful things. So knowing that you can draw on the power of incredible women behind you who want to see you succeed and thrive, what are you calling in right now? What can we do to help?
Well, I'm not shy, as you well know. So there are really only three things I ever ask, and it's these three things. Write a check, introduce me to someone who can write a check, or give me a platform where I can educate and empower people to understand why venture is such an important and powerful class. And that's it.
Laurel, you are such a charmer. You are so audacious. You live a big, beautiful, bold life. I'm grateful to have you here on today's show. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This has really been my true honor. I just adore you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.